Hey, good evening. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope your family's healthy. And if you guys are, as parents, working from home, I hope you guys are trying to figure out a new rhythm now that we're, 4 days in, maybe a week for some of you, into this rhythm. If you're a parent, you've almost made it through. Tomorrow is the last day of the first week of having your children home all the time. I hope you're learning a new rhythm for that, because obviously, as you heard this week, it's probably going to be quite a bit longer before kids return to school, and what was the normal finds a way to return, and this is kind of our new normal. And part of our new normal, we talked about through emails and in videos earlier, and hopefully you've seen throughout the week, that we've talked about in our new normal that we as a staff at the church want to try and be really aggressive about being accessible and engaging with you. And the best way to do that, because we don't have times to get together in meetings during the week, on Sunday morning, is to do that online. And so you've seen this week, we've been posting these daily videos to try and stay online. I hope you watched Mary's on Tuesday. You can go back and watch Mary's. I think Jack leaning into the shot was probably my favorite favorite moment of hers. And then Aaron yesterday morning, just talking a little bit about the Psalms and leading us a little worship and song. And we're gonna have those coming out every day, and maybe as we have capacity, we'll do more or do some special stuff. So kind of keep an eye out for those things coming out. And so on Thursdays, I'm going to take an opportunity on Thursdays to kind of reflect on the week and give you a little thought or something to think on. And this week, as we're going into our first Sunday, where basically every church in America is not going to be able to meet, especially in Oregon. All of the churches in our community, I had a little get together with most of the pastors this morning. All of them are going 100% online, and we're all having conversations about how we navigate that, how do we figure that out. And as I mentioned earlier in the week, we're trying to figure out as a staff, how do we create an online experience, digital experience that isn't simply a cheap copycat of in person, but is really built to be engaging and built for being online. And so this week we're going to be adding some stuff. We're going to experiment with stuff. We're going to try stuff. Nobody's been here. I mean, none of us alive have lived through a pandemic. And so we're trying to figure things out. And so I hope that you'll go along with the ride with us. Some things are going to be awesome and amazing, and we're probably going to learn some things as a church that we're going to keep doing well after this, because it's going to be great. And sometimes we're going to try some things and they're going to be a dumpster fire and it's going to be a mess, and we won't do it again. But this weekend, as we go into our first weekend of just all digital, I know our stats, a couple hundred people joined online this last weekend, but as we go all digital for the foreseeable future, all online Sunday gathering at 11 a.m. First of all, there's a couple cool things. We're all getting together, right? Over the last couple years, since we've been 2 services, getting all together has been a rarity for us as a church, largely because our kids' ministries just exploded and we haven't been able to house all the kids. But we all get together, and I would really encourage you to join. If you join on Facebook, that's fine. Way better experience is to go to mymcc.info and get on there, because there's a link there for this platform, and there's more engagement, and there's more options and more interaction. And so go to mymcc.info this Sunday. It'll go live at like 10:45. Service will start at 11. And we'll see how it goes. We'll all figure this out together. And we'd love to hear from you about how we can, what was really impactful for you. But we'll talk more about that on Sunday. But today, I wanted to actually reshift your thinking on a verse that we use all the time about what I would consider a core value for us that we have to renavigate during this season. And one of the things we talk about as a church, you've probably heard me say, is that we believe that there's something uniquely powerful when the body gathers. And we've always meant that in person, getting together, why it was so important for us to to make showing up on Sundays, showing up to Rooted, showing up to groups so important, because there's something mysteriously powerful about that. Paul might use the language of a mysterious that happens in that space. And one of the verses that sometimes gets used to justify that biblical, what we believe to be biblical truth, that it's important to gather together. Now we're all going to figure out what it looks like to gather together online, but it's important for us to gather together. Is actually not a good verse to use for that. There's a verse in Matthew 18. If you spent more than a couple months around a church, you've probably heard someone say it at one time, maybe even kind of flippantly offhand. Maybe you've heard someone say this and you didn't even know if it was a verse thing or if it was like a weird like phrase or incanter that churches use or whatever. But someone will say this. They'll say, well, where 2 or 3 are gathered. Right? And it comes from this verse, Matthew 18, verse 20. I got up on my screen here. It says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I with them. There I am with them. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I with them. And we go, see, look, when 2 or 3 people gather together, God's presence is there, and it's powerful, and I believe those things are true. This is a really bad verse to justify that. This is a really bad verse to justify it. And the reason it's a really bad verse to justify it, because if you've been around on a Sunday morning, you've heard me say this probably a million times. Context, 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 context. This verse, now the headings in your Bible aren't from the original authors. They were added by editors, and they're different in each version of the Bible, translation of the Bible and stuff like that. But in the one I'm looking at, it's even sitting under a heading that has nothing to do with corporate gatherings. The heading, as I'm looking at right here in the NIV, the heading is titled Dealing with Sin in the Church. Dealing with sin in the church, and then it has this verse that we quote about why we should be gathering corporately. It's this verse about, when a brother sins against you, to go to them one, and when you've gone to them alone, if they don't respond, then bring another witness with them. It's this kind of process for reconciliation, right? And it's really beautiful, sometimes referred to as church discipline, but that's kind of jumping to the end of it and a negative view on it. It's this invitation to address the conflict between you and a brother or sister, right? And then it says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am with them. That reconciliation is a uniquely powerful experience of the presence of God. That when there's reconciliation, the power, the Spirit of God is felt in that place and in that way, in a mysteriously and beautiful way that it is nowhere else. It's not actually about corporate gatherings. And the reason that I think this is important is because when we begin to take this verse out of context and begin to believe the mistruth that there's something different when 2 or 3 gather, right? For where 2 or 3 gathered in my name, and it asks the question of, well, what if 2 or 3 aren't gathered? What if one's gathered? What if I'm alone? What if maybe during this whole quarantine thing, you're alone in a room or in your house, and it begins to teach a orthopraxy. It begins to teach a practice, not even orthopraxy, but it begins to teach a practice that the presence of God is more tangible and more real when there's more people gathered, but the presence of God is somehow diminished when it's just you alone. And it robs us. It robs us of the beauty of the truth of Scripture that God is here. Here. Like where you're sitting in the moment you're watching, whether you're watching this live or you're watching this months, weeks, or years later, that God's presence is in this place. God's presence isn't in a building, in an auditorium, in seats, in a gathering. That God's presence is here. That in this season that we're going into, where we're going to be physically isolated from one another more than we ever have, for an unknown period of time, I want you to know and be reminded that God's presence is here. John 1 begins with this great poetry, and it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word came and dwelt among us." The Word is reminiscent back of the Hebrew tabernacle, that God came and dwelt among his people, that God dwells amongst you, that where you are, that God is there. And so the question I'd have for you as you're watching this, and I'd love to hear from you. You can comment, right? You're probably watching on social somewhere. There's got to be a comment box somewhere down here, right? You can comment or share a picture or a video or a thought of where during this season of physical isolation, absence of this corporate gathering, where have you seen the presence of God, of this promise that God dwells amongst us, that God dwells with us, that God's presence is everywhere, that as the psalmists say, there's nowhere you can go to escape God, right? You can go to the deepest depths and he is there. You can go to highest heights and he is there. And so how in this season have your eyes been open to see God's presence in a way that you hadn't before? May you, in this season, become more acutely aware of the beauty and the power of his presence in all things, not just in 60 minutes on Sunday morning. Love you guys. Looking forward to getting together with you digitally on Sunday. Looking forward to talking to you, many of you on the phone and email, on social, and may God continue to grow your faith. Love you guys.